In today's video, we are going to talk about the balanced data slate and the points changes. If you're interested in particularly the armies I play, like Death Guard, Drukari, Space Marines and all that good stuff, you're going to get a lot of feedback from my side. But even the armies I don't personally play, like Chaos Knights, Imperial Knights and so on, I'm going to cover because there are a lot of changes for them that are affecting nearly any other faction in the game as well. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about all the changes, and if you enjoy the content, consider leaving a thumbs up and subscribing, as well as checking the links down in the description below if you want to follow me over on social media or support my content via Patreon or Ko-Fi. My name is ePlash and this is Empire of Wargames. As you may know, the data slate dropped today. I want to go over all the rules really quick. I'm not going to talk about them too much. If there's something super important, I'm going to kind of expand my thoughts a little bit. But as it were, I'm just going to go over the rules, summarize them a little bit, and talk about them in a quick manner. So let's start with the core rules and the data slate itself. You're going to find the links for the PDFs down in the pinned comment below or in the description below. So first up, we have the changes for devastating wounds. Devastating wounds are now no kind of mortal wound, so it doesn't splash anymore. All it does is ignore any armor save. So Feel No Pain, as always, works normally, but it kind of bypasses regular armor saves and invulnerable saves. And yeah, it doesn't splash anymore because they are not mortal wounds. So all it does is basically deal a lot of damage to specific units, and that's all you can do. No splashing. That is somewhat good for Custodes and somewhat not, but especially the target here are obviously the Eldari, especially the Wraith Knight. So I think considering that, I think the devastating wounds changes are okay, but other armies that are kind of reliant on devastating wounds being mortal wounds, I can't think of too many right now, they are kind of in a problematic situation, but it's not too much and it's not too bad. Still, weapons like, for example, combi weapons are going to melt through Custodes armor. It's going to be an interesting thing, but no splashing anymore, and that is the core thing that devastating wounds changed. It's a good change. I don't think devastating wounds are significantly weaker, or it's not a useless rule by any stretch of the imagination, but it was changed in the appropriate way. I really like this change. Next up, we have the rules for modifying CP cost for stratagems. Now, you only can modify the CP cost of battle tactic stratagems. So something like Overwatch is a strategic ploy stratagem and cannot be modified, thus you are not able to spam Fire Overwatch. That's a great rule. And if you are targeting multiple units with your free command point ability or stratagem, all of them need to have the CP reduction ability. Otherwise, you're paying. And it is a good rule overall. It makes things easier to understand. Strong stratagems are not able to kind of be cast for free all the time. And overall, it's a good change. Nothing really to complain about here. It's just an all-around good thing to have Overwatch and other stratagems that have been spammed over and over again balanced a little bit. Speaking of Fire Overwatch was changed. So it is not only a strategic ploy and thus not able to be free. You're also only going to affect an enemy unit that is visible to your unit. That wasn't clarified before that, and you could just, you know, fire Overwatch whenever you wanted to, even with armies that have kind of, that don't need line of sight basically. And the other big restriction is you cannot target a Titanic unit with this stratagem. Now the explanation, what I saw for the video, I didn't watch it all the way through, but what I've seen from the video is that they decided to do that because Knights have a lot of firepower, and especially Fire Overwatch basically gives them an opportunity to shoot in the enemy's combat phase as well with their high firepower weapons. And while I agree with that, I think this target is more targeted at the Wraith Knight. Again, it's all the Eldari's fault, basically. And it is hitting or targeting Chaos Knights and Imperial Knights as well for no reason. I admit that their weapons are very strong, and they are Knights after all, but kind of changing the Fire Overwatch stratagem to 2 CP for these armies, and Eldari as well for that matter, would have been a more elegant solution because 2 CP is quite expensive, and you would only very rarely use it. But having a knee stratagem is better than taking it away completely from Titanic units. And thus, while I agree that, you know, the change that an enemy unit has to be visible to you is great, just taking this stratagem away from Titanic units altogether is not the correct play, and instead should have been a 2 CP stratagem for Titanic units. Next up in the stride from GW, to make battle shock and leadership and so on matter a little bit more, they are changing the Insane Bravery stratagem. While a lot of the wording was specified and nailed down, which is really good, the restriction at the very bottom of the stratagem is the meat and potatoes basically of the change. It reads, you cannot use the stratagem more than once per battle. And that is a great change. They could have gone the same way that I suggested for Fire Overwatch and instead made Insane Bravery a 2 CP stratagem, which I think wouldn't have been too bad. But yeah, you cannot use the stratagem more than once per battle is fine as well. Currently, Battle Shock and all that good stuff is struggling. It is not as interactive and as cool as everyone thought it would be, I think including the designers. So changing Insane Bravery does make sense, but I think there need to be some rules changes regarding Battle Shock and making it more interactive, more fun, have more impact, and especially the armies that rely on Battle Shock, like for example Tyranids, they need a little bit something to make it more spicy. But the Insane Bravery stratagem change is a good step forward. Next up, we have ruins and the visibility. Now, towering models have always had a problem, and the towering rule has been annoying a lot of people, and now they change it the following way. Towering models can benefit from cover, so if you're standing behind ruins, it's a little bit easier to hide them. That's at least what I got from the video. But also, you do not need to be wholly within a terrain piece to be considered to be on it so you can shoot through it, because only wholly within units can technically shoot out of a ruin. Now for Titanic or towering models, in that case, you can just touch the ruin or be on it, I guess, partly, and you can still show through. That is basically the change, and I really like it. So as a towering model, you cannot see everyone all the time, and you yourself have to touch a terrain piece or can touch a terrain piece and shoot through it. I think that's a good change. It makes things a little bit more approachable when it comes to towering models, and it makes the game less oppressive when playing against Imperial Knights if you are not playing a skew list that is specifically made to destroy big targets like, you know, Imperial Knights. So yeah, a good change. I want to see this one in practice. I've not had the chance to play a lot against Knights, but the few games I've played with towering were really not that interactive. I either had a list to beat them or I didn't. And now with the new towering rule, I want to see if I can maybe hide some units, maybe win with a not skew list, but via, you know, playing objectives and so on. That is what I'm most curious about. Next up, we are going to talk about the faction rules. For the Adeptus Custodes, the Unwavering Sentinel stratagem is now an epic deed. So you cannot have the stratagem that allows you to fight first for free. That is a very important change, a huge nerf, and makes them actually approachable in melee now, which is a good thing. But Custodes players are considering this to be a huge nerf and possibly one that is of a magnitude that is bigger of all what the Eldari have received, which I think is a slight overreaction. Yes, it is a big nerf, but it's not game or world ending. Like, the Adeptus Custodes are still going to be okay-ish. Now with the other changes, your unit composition has changed, so no more taking smaller units or bigger units, especially 10-man blobs have changed. You can now only bring 5 Custodian Guard, 5 Custodian Wardens, up to 3 Virtus Praetors. What I don't like about this is that, while I think it's fine that the unit sizes have shrunk down, they've also increased the points cost for all of their HQ choices or leader choices, and it kind of doesn't go well together, because your leader choices and HQ choices are already worse because you're only buffing 5 models at most, and they went up in points. That is something that is a double nerf that I feel is too much. They should have picked one and went with it, and if it's still too strong, then next Dataslate round they could have iterated on that. Instead, GW always does this, they go the double whammy with everything they do almost, and it feels like it's just two different designers making the choices, and it's weird. So I don't know how they tested this, but in my kind of first initial impression, it is too much. It should have just been the unit sizes changed while the leader choices stay the points they are right now, but it is what it is. Currently, the Adeptus Custodes nerf, I would say, is huge. Their changes have been big, but I still think they are going to be easily above 50% win rate. That is my current estimation. Next up, we have the Adeptus Mechanicus. The Adeptus Mechanicus did not receive enough. Now, Skitarii Rangers and Skitarii Vanguard are now a 4+ save with a 5+ invulnerable save. So technically speaking, they are now better than a Guardsman, which is good. But considering the strategies and kind of synergies that Guardsmen have, I would still consider Skitarii Rangers and Vanguard to be a little less good. Now, when it comes to the points changes for the Adeptus Mechanicus, they went down across the board, which is not bad. That is something you want. It is a buff. But what I've read a lot, and I think I agree with everyone saying that, is that their wallets are weeping, because the Adeptus Mechanicus is already one of the most expensive armies you can collect in the game. And making everything cheaper means you need more models. And yeah, as an army that is already easily in the top 3 of most expensive armies in 40k, they are making the army more expensive. And that is something I dislike. I understand why they do not want to touch the data cards because they are printed. And all they want to do is make just those basic changes. I mean, those are still, the saves are still data card changes. But I think they want to keep it at a bare minimum to these changes and instead do everything with points. It doesn't always work like that. I think in the case of the Adeptus Mechanicus, they needed to be a little bit better even and maybe kept the points the same. I think making them more expensive as an army to collect when it comes to your money is a problematic thing. Other than that, I like this change, and I think the Adeptus Mechanicus should have received more, making their, army rule and everything a little bit more interactable. Their detachment rule, army-wide, all that good stuff would have been way better. But, we take what we can get, and I think that the Adeptus Mechanicus is not going to make it above 45%. Let's be completely honest here. Yes, the points changes are good. They've received a lot of points changes, but I don't think it's quite enough. Next up, we are talking about the dreaded Eldari, which are wreaking havoc on 10th edition with their 70 to 80% win rates. All the tournament winning lists are Eldari and no one can touch them. What they've changed is that Phantasm is only going to be targetable at infantry models, which I think is a really good change. Instead of making it more expensive, I think GW for once, I have to give them credit where credit is due, they've chosen to use their Scalpel instead of their Excavator. And yeah, the Phantasm change is excellent. I really like this one. When it comes to the models and the points that went up, I think it's fine. Tournament winning lists went up by approximately 350 points, which I think personally is enough for now. A lot of people were asking for a points increase so that the tournament winning lists go up by another 500 points, but I think that might have been a little bit extreme. So I want to see what is actually going to just to affect the Eldari in general, because you have to consider the Phantasm stratagem is changed, points went up from tournament winning lists by approximately 350 points, and you need to consider that devastating wounds have changed, and all the other rules we've covered a couple of minutes ago are mostly targeting the Eldari as well. So please keep all of that in mind when looking at these changes, because yes, at first glance one could think that the Eldari have not been nerfed enough, but if you take everything into consideration, I think that the Eldari are not going to be as dominant as they were before. I still think they are going to be a top tier army simply because, yeah, their codex is just that good. It's just that simple. The points changes I think are good. Fire Prisons for 180 are good. They have increased the points cost for Wraith Guard and the Wraith Knight again, despite those getting nerfed, especially the Wraith Knight with devastating wounds and so on. But yeah, I still think that the Eldari are easily going to be a just above 50% win rate army. So we are going to have to wait and see for them, but I don't agree with most of kind of social media and Reddit that they have not been nerfed enough. I think it's fine. So next up we have the Death Guard. I'm going to skip over the Agents of the Imperium because I don't think that the changes are just worth mentioning. So we have the Death Guard. We have an additional rule. So we have our detachment rule called Spread the Sickness, and this one I always criticized for not being enough. A lot of people disagreed with me. I don't know why, but yeah, I've played approximately 50-ish games with Death Guard, some at tournaments, some casually, some at, just crusade campaigns. And Spread the Sickness just isn't as good as people made it out to be, at least the ones that tried to argue with me. Now Spread the Sickness has an additional part to the rule. During the declare battle formation step, select one of the sicknesses below. Until the end of the battle, all units from your army with the Nurgle's gift ability gain the selected sickness. That is most of your army. So we have Skullscorn Blight as an aura. While an enemy unit is within contagion range of this unit, worsen the ballistic skill and weapon skill characteristics of weapons equipped by models in that enemy unit by 1. That is an incredible debuff, especially armies that are already struggling to hit. And by struggling, I mean 4+ or worse, so especially orcs at range. They are going to have massive problems hitting anything. And even a change from a 3-up to a 4-up is noticeable. So Skullscorn Blight, I think, is going to be probably one of the most popular changes or Spread the Sickness attachment rules that I can see being used. Skullscorn is just so good. Then we have Rattlejoint Orc, which is an aura which reads, while an enemy unit is within contagion range of this unit, worsen the save characteristic of models in that enemy unit by 1. This is pretty good because even units that usually ignore, I don't know, AP or something are still getting targeted by this. I can see this being especially useful against Adeptus Custodes, especially with all the AP0 weapons we have as Death Guard. But yeah, this one seems way more niche. I would definitely consider this against Adeptus Custodes. But generally speaking, this one doesn't seem too much like an auto take like Skullscore and Blight. So yeah, see it as a niche option for armies with super high armor saves. And last but not least, we have Scarabus Soul Rod, which reads, while an enemy unit is within contagion range of this unit, worsen the leadership and objective control characteristic of model in that enemy unit by 1 to a minimum of 1. This is specifically strong against armies like Genestealer Cults, which have a lot of battle line. I don't know if they are going to take as much battle line as before, but previously you would have always taken this against Genestealer Cults. And yeah, if you know you're going to play against a lot of battle line, this is definitely the one to take, because you're going to reduce it all to 1. And at that point, you're going to make all that battle line manageable for your army. That is usually going to bring less models, like, for example, as compared to Genestealer Cults or Tyranids and so on. So this one, niche as well, still very good, especially against Horde armies, especially against battle line heavy armies. And yeah, you have a little bit of everything here. So the Scarabus Soul Rod is good against Horde armies. Rattle Joint Orc, in my opinion, is good against super elite armies that have great saves, like, for example, Grey Knights and Adeptus Custodes. And Skullscore and Blight is good against anything else, and usually against those armies as well. I think the first one is really, really good. So, yeah. Spread the Sickness is okay. It is still the debuff theme that GW wants to go with for the Death Guard, which I still don't agree with. I think the Death Guard should be more durable. That is the kind of fantasy that you sold the player on when you sold him the Death Guard 5 years ago. But yeah, what we've gotten here is definitely a step in the right direction. It seems that someone actually thought about something that makes the army a little bit better, a little bit more fun to use. And yeah, especially considering the points changes that we've seen for the Death Guard, especially for units like the Hellbrood, which I always say is one of my favorite models. But this time, I can see it being used in competitive, because the Hellbrood is not only damn cool and hits really hard, but also it kind of spreads the contagion thingy on the unit you hit with your Hellbrood. And at that point, if they are getting debuffed, if their save is lowered, or if they are getting -1 to their ballistic skill, at that point it gets really good. And the Hellbrood being cheaper on top of that, you know, I'm actually going to bring 3 on my next 2000 points game, and I'm going to test it out. I can actually see them being very, very scary. When it comes to the rest of the models, you can easily run. I've seen people talking about lists of just 1 Demon Prince on foot and like 50 Plague Marines. You can do that now. I think a squad of 5 of them costs 80 points now. So yeah, they are very cheap at this point. They are still not as durable as they were, but at least they made them cheaper. So I think that's a good compromise. So overall, I think the Death Guard changes are good. They are definitely more plentiful than they were for the Adeptus Mechanicus. So I'm happy that the Death Guard got a little bit more help. Are they going to make the Death Guard suddenly a lot more fun to play? Probably not. But as long as you have a fighting chance to at least be an army that is above 45% win rate, which I hope the Death Guard have, I'm not 100% sure on that yet, I think the changes are fine. So we are going to have to wait and see on this one. The changes are substantial, and I want to check them out first in action, and I want to see them in tournaments before just, you know, giving you my final impression on them. But my first impression is quite positive. Next up, we have the Deathwatch change. The rounds from them are now only applicable to bolt weapons. Now they play a lot like what I think Imperial Fists should have always felt like. So yeah, very interesting that they changed all to bolt weapons. But obviously the Deathwatch have access to high firepower kind of weapons, especially high just number of shots weapons, and equipped with the rounds, they made them very, very scary. So any weapon that has like, I don't know, 6-7 shots are very scary with these rounds. And thus they mitigated that by specifying that the Dragonfire, Hellfire, and Kraken rounds only applicable to bolt weapons. And below that, I'm not going to show that on screen, but in the Dataslate, you can see all the weapons in a specific list that are considered bolt weapons. I really like this because not all of them have bolt in their name. The Vigil Spear, for example, does not have any bolt in its name. So I'm thankful that they have specified what a bolt weapon is, and I hope they are going to use that table moving forward for all bolt-specific rules. And yeah, good change for the Deathwatch. It's a nerf, but still good change. Alright, next up we come to the other army, like out of the top 3 that is considered to be meta, and that is the Genestealer Cults. The Genestealer cults have taken a big hit. Not only are their points going up almost across the board, and especially for their battle line, which is considered to be their core of the army, the specific thing that makes them strong, but also the rule Cult Ambush has been changed significantly. So usually, how it was back a couple of days ago, it was that you can bring battle line units back 100% of the time, all the time. Now you do not. So what you do is you roll 1d6, adding 1 to the result if the unit is battle line, and adding 1 to the result if it's the first or second battle round. And on a 5+, you add that unit, an identical unit, to your army in Cult Ambush, and that is that. So you do not have a 100% chance to bring battle line back all the time, and what you basically have is for the first 2 turns, you add 1 to the result of your d6, and you add another one. So the general chance to get your battle line back in order is way lower, like significantly lower. So you went from basically 100% chance to get your battle line back to just a low percentage chance to get your battle line back, and that is a significant change in addition to the points changes. So I think that the Genestealer cults have gotten hit hard, especially their core mainstay, which is their battle line, has gotten hit very hard. If you look at the points as well, yeah, as I said, most of their battle line got hit, but you know, the Genestealer cults also have a lot of units that are, in my opinion, undiscovered, underutilized, and just underestimated as a whole. So I hope the Genestealer cults kind of player base is going to experiment a little bit, try to diversify their list a little bit, maybe slightly away from battle line, and trying to bring a little bit more hard-hitting units instead of just swarming everything with OC. And I'm very curious to see where that goes. But I'm not going to deny that this nerf is incredibly hard. So yeah. Is it a good change? I think it's a lot, you know, this paired with the points changes, but I think it is somewhat deserved. I'm a little bit scared that this nerf is all in all worse than the Eldari one. There's the one thing that I would consider to be a little bit bad, but I'm going to have to wait and see with this one. It is a hefty nerf, but yeah, I'm going to have to see this in action. My first impression on this one is that it is quite the harsh nerf. It is one of the best armies out there still, but yeah, we're going to have to wait and see. Next up, we have the Grey Knights. First up, we have the Haloed and Soulfire stratagem went to a strategic ploy stratagem, so you cannot force it to be free. That is a nerf for some reason, but it is there. What you need to pay attention to for the Grey Knights, most of all, are the points. The points went down, I think, almost across the board, and I think that the Grey Knights are a little bit better because of it, because the quality of their units is still quite high, and while I think that some of the units could have used some help when it comes to their data card in specific, and just the effectiveness of the model, I think going down in points is always a win. So I hope that the Grey Knights players are going to be able to bring more models. Generally, what I've seen and the math I came up with for the Grey Knights is that the point changes are not quite enough. So you can barely bring another unit of whatever, of just basic, of a strike squad basically, in most lists I've seen that are used in a tournament level. For casual players, it is nice that some of the stuff got cheaper, but you know, it's not really worth mentioning. So the Grey Knights, all in all, I think are very similar to the Adeptus Mechanicus, where yes, they have been changed and the points went down, but I don't think it's quite enough. Next up, we have Imperial Knights. Their stratagems have been changed to epic deeds. So Thunderstomp is an epic deed now. Trophy Claim costs 2 CP now. Valiant Last Stand costs 2 CP now. And until the start of the next command phase, the Armiger model you selected is affected by that Bondsman ability. So yeah, you need to specify the Armiger unit. It's all changes that, I don't know, the nerfs that you've seen for the Imperial Knights kind of indicate for me that GW maybe overestimates them a little bit. Yes, they've been really good at the very beginning of this edition as people were trying to figure things out. I think it went down continually from there. We've got some points updates, just hot fixes basically. And I think those brought down the Imperial Knights quite significantly. The Chaos Knights just kind of pay with their mere existence. Being a Chaos Knights player in 10th edition really damn sucks, just to say that. Their points changes and everything are bad, and just the way that GW treats Chaos Knights sucks ass. And I'm going to just say it how it is. But for the Imperial Knights, the nerf is quite significant. I'm not sure what the idea here was, but I think that GW saw the Imperial Knights winning at the very beginning of the edition, where they were very, very kind of overpowering, and towering was very good, and their points were very low, and now their points have been hotfixed. Their points have been changed again. The towering has been nerfed. And now the Imperial Knights with most of their stratagems have been nerfed as well, and the armigers are getting affected as well. So they are basically targeting everything, and it is too much. The Imperial Knights are getting a hefty hit, and I think the Imperial Knights are probably running for probably the first army that I would say maybe one of the just dominant armies from the start of 10th edition that is going to drop below 45%. Just my first impression on these changes. Then we have the Leagues of Votann, an army that needed help, similar to the Death Guard and the Adeptus Mechanicus. So we have the Ruthless Efficiency Detachment rule, and you change it to the following paragraphs. At the start of the battle, select a number of units from your opponent's army depending on the battle size as shown below. Incursion, obviously 1000 points, you pick 2 units. Strike Force, the tournament size, you pick 4 units. And Onslaught, you pick 6 units. Each of those units start with 2 Judgment tokens. So you're getting +1 to hit and +1 to wound against them at all times, which is against 4 units, and that is significant. That is quite a lot. And you still have all your options with Uther and with your units dying and so on to distribute further tokens. So I think it is very realistic to say that most opposing armies are going to have 3/4 of their army with 2 Judgment tokens on them by the end of the game, and you are going to get your bonuses used actually. I really like this change. I really like that the Strike Force is getting 4 units to target with 2 Judgment tokens from the very start. And yeah, the changes are really good. And then it reads at the bottom, if at the start of your command phase, any of those units have been destroyed, you gain a number of CP depending on how early in the game you destroyed it as shown below. You can only gain CP once this way. So this is just an addition. You just have to pick any of those 4 units, and it's really damn good. So yeah, the army change, the army-wide rules change for the Leagues of Votann is exceptionally good, and I think it is going to bring them at least in line with other armies, and together with the points changes, which have been lowered across the board for the Leagues of Votann, not by that much, but just enough to make it worthwhile, I think the Leagues of Votann are going to easily climb their way out of a sub 45% win rate to 48%. Just, you know, a cautious 48%, I think, is a good estimate for them. And yeah, what GW did with Ruthless Efficiency is a really good change. I'm curious to see what Leagues of Votann players think on this change, because I personally have an army of Leagues of Votann, but it's just, you know, barely 2,000 points. So I'm not playing him too much. I have not played him too much in 10th edition. So if you've been playing Leagues of Votann a ton, let me know what you think about this rule. If you've maybe already had the chance to play a game today, I would be very curious to hear what you think. And last but not least, we have the Space Marines. The Space Marines have a limitation on the Desolation Marines. They need further nerfs. Not only have their points been upped, but also you can only bring Desolation squads in a unit size of 5. So the maximum of Desolation Marines you can bring is 15 per list. So everyone who has 30 of them painted, I feel really bad for you. That's all I can say. Then we have other models that went down in points. The Aggressor Squad went down. So 3 models cost 100 points, 6 models cost 200 points. I think this is an appropriate points value for them. The general just number of attacks went down with each edition. Aggressors got a little bit worse each edition, I feel like. And I feel like they could be even a little bit cheaper than they are now. But 100 points for 3 models is okay-ish. Assault Intercessors went down in points significantly. You are paying 80 points for 5 models, which I think actually makes them worthwhile. And I can also explain why they went down in points so significantly. Assault Intercessors are probably going to be rarely used in comparison to our new Assault Marines. So the Primaris Marines with Jump Pack that we are getting soonish. So the Assault Intercessors need some kind of help, so people actually consider bringing them at all. Then we have the Dreadnoughts. The Dreadnoughts almost across the board went down in points. The Ballistus Dreadnought for 150 points, down from 170, is, I think, an amazing model and definitely worth bringing. I'm not sure about its competitive potential, but if you pair the changes to the Ballistus Dreadnought, 150 points, together with the changes to our little favorite tanks, we have the Gladiator tanks that all went up in points, I think that the Ballistus Dreadnought is generally not a bad pick at all. Blade Guard Veterans have been changed. We have the Brutalis Dreadnought went down in points significantly. I'm not sure how many points it was before. I think it was 225 or 220. It is now 175. It is a significant points drop. So if you have a Brutalis Dreadnought just laying around, if you're a Blood Angels player and you really like them design-wise, now's the time to bring them. Especially in casual, they are going to be great. For competitive, I still don't see them being used, but who knows? I might be wrong. Then we have other models. We have Centurion squads, which had seen points changes. Not too big, but, you know, it is there. A lot of the character models, like Tigurius, we have Torgaradon, all these models have seen points drops. We have, obviously, the Desolation squad, which seen nerfs. Yeah, and all these models. The Gladiators have seen points just increases across the board, which I think is fine, because they were kind of without alternative in the Space Marine Codex. And yes, is there anything else worth mentioning? The Impulsor is now 85 points, which I think is kind of cool. Heavy Intercessors are now 105 points, which I think is fine. They're pretty good. They are excellent objective holders, so 105 points I can see being fair. Other models, Intercessors went down to 85 points. Infiltrators went down to 100 points. Infernus Marines, Incursor squads, all went down, and I think it is all in preparation to make them just worthwhile against Jump Marines. I think Jump Marines are going to be the new hotness. They're going to be incredibly strong in the new codex. I obviously haven't seen any or heard any rumors about them, but I think all of these units without jump packs are going to need significantly, need help overall to just compete with a unit that has, what, 12 inches of movement, 14 inches of movement. So yeah, there's that to consider. Is there anything else to consider? Manius Kalga got changes, really good. Outriders, Reavers, 85 points, which I really like. I really like Reavers visually. Robotic Element got a points increase to 380. That is quite significant. But Robotic Element is also very strong. He is a melee powerhouse. He is a buffing powerhouse. He's quite durable on his own. So I can see why Robotic Element was upped in points. And yeah, we have the Stormspeeder Hail Strike, which is a little bit cheaper. The Stormspeeder Thunder Strike is a little bit more expensive. I'm not sure how much the Thunder Strike was before. But at 170 points, it is still okay. The Hail Strike, I think, is going to be a very good pick. I'm a big fan of Storm Speeders, and I think they are heavily underutilized. Yes, they're quite squishy, but their special rules they bring to the table, like adding +1 to hit, to wound, or ignoring cover, is incredible, generally. So yeah, those are all the changes I wanted to talk about when it comes to the points. Obviously, Space Wolves have seen a lot of points changes, which I think are good most of the time. For some reason, they nerfed scouts, like Wolf Scouts. I don't know why. They have not been that great either way. We have the Tau Empire points changes. They are good across the board. I hope we are going to see more Pathfinders. Broadside Battlesuits have seen a points decrease that is quite significant. They went from 110 points, I think, to 90 points per model. I think that makes them okay, you know? They're still quite expensive. 270 points for 3 is not cheap, but I think it makes them worthwhile. Cadre Fireblade went down in points. Great. Commander Farsight went down in points significantly because he's bad. Great. We have the Cold Star Battlesuit, which went down at least a little bit, 10 points. Also good. All of these models went down. Even Crisis Battlesuits went down for some inexplicable reason. Yes, Tau are not that great right now, but still, you know, points decreases on Crisis Battlesuits is quite surprising, actually. They went from 290 points for 6 of them to 260 points for 6 of them. Then we have the Darkstrider went down in points. We have just most of the stuff. Even the Ghost Skill Battlesuit went down in points, and that is one of the models that I consider to be one of the best ones that the Tau Empire has access to currently. We have Crude Farstalkers went down from 105 points to 75 points. That is an insane points decrease. Crude are getting a huge resurgence. Crude Carnivores seeing a points decrease for 10 models from 75 to 55 points. So yeah, Crude in general are in great shape, and I think these changes are definitely warranted. When it comes to other units like the Storm Surge, which went down from, you know, 405 to 400 points, and the Strike Team, which went down from 100 points to 80 points, which I just really like. I like the Tau Infantry. Those are great changes. The Storm Surge is just insignificant. What actually happened to our favorite model, the Riptide? Where is it? There it is. It costs now 180 points, down from 235. That is a significant change, but also its weapon hit like a wet noodle. So that is still a problem. I think that the Riptide needs a change to its weapon systems, or just guns in general, rather than points changes. Yes, you can make them super cheap. At some point, they are worth bringing. I think for 180 points, you can consider bringing them without actually having to feel super bad about them. So yeah, a points drop of 55 points here is warranted, and I hope people are going to bring their Riptides because they're, for one, expensive models, and you've probably put a lot of work into them, so being able to bring them without having to feel bad is actually a great thing. They're not going to see competitive, I think. So yeah, the Tau changes all in all are really good. I really like them. Some mainstays of the army like piranhas and so on are obviously unchanged, but that was to be expected. Next up, we are going to talk about Thousand Suns, and there are a couple of things I want to lead with. So first up are the changes to Eldari, Adeptus Custodes, and the Genestealer cults are going to affect them in a significant way. All three armies are getting significant nerfs targeted at them specifically. The Custodes are losing their kind of melee castle powerhouse thing, whatever you want to call it. They're not invincible in melee anymore. The Genestealer cults are not invincible with their battleline anymore, and Eldari have taken a huge hit to their hardest hitting weapons they have. Everything gone up in points, devastating wounds are not what they used to. And I think the Thousand Suns nerfs, the points that you can see, which are up across the board almost, are a response to that. I don't want to give GW too much credit here and their designers, because usually they're not looking out that far ahead. But this time around, it really feels like the Thousand Suns are getting these points changes in this combination with all the top armies getting nerfed as well. As you can see, Ahriman went up by 20 points. The Exalted Sorcerer went up by 10. The Infernal Master went up by, I don't know, 20 or 15. The Mutilate Vortex Beast went up from 145 to 165. Rubik Marines went up by 10 points per 5 models. Scarab Cultuminates went up by 10 as well. So these are not devastating points changes. I think the Thousand Suns list that we've been seeing around are probably going to go up in points by 150 to 100 maybe. The problem here is that you need to consider that this is not just a change to points with the Thousand Suns. You're also going to get less Cabal points. And that is something I hope that GW considered when they were writing these rules and revising their points, because less Cabal points means significantly less efficiency for the Thousand Suns. I'm very curious to see where they end up in the new meta, and especially when they're with their tournaments winnings. Casually, they're going to be absolutely fine. That's why I'm not talking about that too much. But from a competitive standpoint, I'm very, very curious where they are going to end up, because I have massive troubles kind of figuring out where I would place them win rate wise. Are they going to be around 50 or above 50%, or are they going to be a little bit lower? No idea. If you're playing Thousand Suns a lot, I have a Thousand Suns army, but still, let me know in the comments below what you think about these points changes and why GW decided to go with points increases almost across the board. Next up, we have the Tyranids, and the Tyranids, I think, are a great army when it comes to their balancing, and they're just doing fine. And I think that's absolutely okay. What GW should have focused on with the Tyranids is internal balancing. That was what I was asking for a couple of weeks ago, and that's what we didn't get. The Barbguns received nerfs when it comes to their shooting and slowing ability, and they still got a points hit. Not sure why. I think for 50 points they were fine, but I think GW just felt like having to nerf them by another 10 points. I don't quite understand why. The Swarmlord went up in points. The Swarmlord previously was 250 points and now it's 270 points, and the Swarmlord was already a very niche unit. I wonder what happened in balancing and what happened in their internal data for that to be warranted. The same applies for the Tyrannofex. The Tyrannofex wasn't a tournament unit as far as I can tell, and they nuked it from orbit. It's incredible what a huge nerf that unit got. It went from 200 points to 245 points. And consider this, Tyranids are already struggling with anti-tank units. And the one unit that Tyranids are picking, which is just an auto-include against tanks, are Zoanthropes. And Zoanthropes got a nerf for 3 models from 90 points to 110 points, or for 6 models, you know, the equivalent change. So you're paid 180 points previously, now you're paying 220 for 6 models. And people are still forced to pick them because Tyranids have basically no super reliable good anti-tank weapons. And with the Tyrannofex nerfed instead of being buffed a little bit, it won't change anything. All you've achieved, GW, is making Tyranids more expensive. That's all you did. When it comes to the other models, they've tried to make Ripper Swarms more enticing, and they've changed Ripper Swarms in a way that you can bring 1 model, 2 models, or 3 models. I kind of like that. But Ripper Swarms are still kind of bad, so it is what it is. With the Screamer Killer, the Screamer Killer was an okay model, went down in points by 10. I think it's fine, not really worth mentioning. Hormagons went down in points by 5 models. The Hive Tyrant went up in points again. The Hive Guard GW are committed to make the Hive Guard just bad, and the Hive Guard were not good before, and they made them 10 points more expensive for 3 models. I don't get it at all. Someone can explain those points changes to me. I would be very curious to hear why those points changes are the way they are, because I cannot tell you. And all the other stuff like the new models I think are not worth mentioning for now, because I want to see the entire codex for myself. I want to try the army, so it's going to be worth waiting for a little bit and just seeing what the Tyranids end up with. But I'm not happy with the Tyranids points changes across the board. The internal balancing should have been fixed, and I think, in my opinion, GW made it worse. That is my first impression. And the last time I wanted to talk about are the World Eaters. The World Eaters went down in points across the board. 8-bound are cheaper by 20 points. Jackals are down in points by 5 at least. Corn Berserkers are significantly down. For 5 models, you used to pay 115 points. Now you are paying 100 points. And the list goes on. The Corn Lord of Skulls now 420 points. Karn is cheaper. The Lord Invocatus is cheaper. You know, just if you look at the list, everything that is marked red is cheaper. And that's good. The World Eaters have been suffering. This is not a melee edition at all. And the World Eaters sadly released a couple of months ago, not a couple of months ago, like half a year ago. And they just slithered right into a melee edition, and they are just an all-melee army. And that sucks. So I hope they are going to be a little bit more playable now. Their win rate wasn't terrible or anything, but they definitely could have used that help, and they received it. And I'm very happy with what I'm seeing for the World Eaters here. Lastly, before we go into the conclusion part, there are some armies I didn't quite talk about a lot, which are the Sisters of Battle, which got a few points changes here or there, like the Triumph of St. Catherine got a little bit cheaper, which I'm a big fan of. Black Templars got a lot cheaper. That High Marshal Helbrecht is now 95 points, is insane. Helbrecht was already an incredible unit for its points. It was incredible for its points back in 9th edition, and it made him cheaper. Black Templars are eating good with this change. Really happy for them. Blood Angels at least have some of their units playable now. One of the most egregious points were the Sanguinary Guard, where you paid 43 points before per model. Now it's 35. It's way better, but it's still not quite there. Sanguinary Guard could have been a little bit cheaper still. The rest of the changes are okay. And we have Chaos Demons. We have a couple of changes here or there. Chaos Knights are getting shafted for absolutely no reason. Chaos Space Marines are getting changes, but I don't think they're worth mentioning too much. Chaos Rhinos are cheap. Chosen are worth mentioning for sure. Chosen are cheaper for some unexplicable reason. Everything else, like Abaddon and all those units that you've used previously a lot, went up in points, but Chosen for some reason didn't. And what I've seen posted a lot is just Chosen in Rhinos and go for it. And I think that is going to be the key strategy for Chaos Space Marines to win their games. And yeah, those are most of the armies I wanted to talk about. The Drukari, that is one of the army I teased at the very beginning of the video. But honestly, there's not much to talk about here. Some of the units got cheaper. It is still Codex Darklands. They didn't do anything at all for Sisters. Incubi are still too expensive. They got shafted just also from orbit. They're so bad. Lilith Hesperax is fine. We have a couple of good units. You know, Drukari are not that horrible, but, you know, the changes are just not cutting it. It's just not enough. So, yeah, the Drukari, I don't like the changes at all, and I think GW should have done a little bit more to make them a little bit more diversified, a little bit more fun, and especially the melee units should have been better. You know, make Drukari a true mixed army. Make them a little bit melee, make them a little bit ranged, and I think it could be one of the most fun armies in the game. Yeah, I hope I went over every army and rules change that is significant. If I forgot anything, drop it down in the comments below if you want to hear my opinion on it, and I'll try to get back to you and answer your question, or, you know, talk about the rule a little bit and expand on my thoughts. Other than that, I would be very curious to hear what you think about your army's changes, and if they have been changed enough, fixed enough, nerfed enough to make it a little bit more fun to play, especially for Eldari players, for casual Eldari players. The past couple of months have been a little bit annoying because, you know, at stores and so on, it has been difficult to play against Eldari players. And a lot of people have been having that stigma that, you know, if it's an Eldari player playing against them, is, you know, just playing against the meta list. And, you know, a lot of Eldari players just didn't get games, which is kind of weird and sad. So I hope that, you know, the Eldari have been changed enough where that stigma goes away and people are just going to play against Eldari, especially casual players, again in a normal way. And yeah, just let me know what you think about the changes, about the army-wide changes, or about the rules-wide changes when it comes to stratagems, multiple free stratagems, you know, terrain features and towering, all that good stuff. I'm very curious about. So yeah, I hope this video was insightful, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.